and welcome. I'm Javier Lopez, and welcome to Geeks Assemble. Level up your 9 to 5 on 95. I'm super excited to welcome an awesome guest speaker today. I'll read her bio. She's just so cool. I had a chance to watch a couple of her panels recently at the Performance Institute's Government Performance Summit of 2022. So Christine Heflin serves as the Evaluation Officer at the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Office of the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs. In this role, she collaborates with the department's Statistical Officer and Chief Data Officer on implementation of the Foundations for the Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018 and the Federal Data Strategy. You know, just these little things that are just like happening in government. Plus, in addition to that, her other executive leadership roles include serving as the Director of Performance Excellence and Deputy Performance Improvement Office, where she coordinated the development of the Department of Commerce's strategic plan and OMB required reporting on plan implementation. Christine, this is so much stuff. It's like I just keep on listing all of these huge accomplishments.
I've handed over the reins of the performance shop. That's now Harry Knight, but I did that for the better part of a decade and still help coordinate the strategic plan, which is our pride and joy here.
That's amazing. You know, it's interesting because a lot of times people, they know that government operates. There's stuff happening out in Washington, D.C., but it's hardworking public servants like yourself that make sure all of this stuff happens.
Yeah. A lot of, we're really a law-driven organization, government is, and highly regulated. So not only getting things done, but complying with all the rules and regs, it's a pretty heavy lift. And we work hard to make sure we don't lose the big picture in all of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Public funds or public trust, right?
That's right. Exactly right.
So you had a couple of panels that you did as well. Let's see. The first one was process management for sustained excellence in customer service, mind you. And then another one on cultivating the adaptive workforce, talking about workforce performance. What were those sessions like for you?
Well, they're both subjects that I have a lot of passion around, to say it lightly. In the case of the process management for excellence in customer service, it's something that I've been promoting for the decade I've been back. I was with the federal government as a young woman, then with local government for a few decades, and then back with the federal government. And one of the things I learned working at city government is the virtue of process management and how necessary it is. And the federal government thinks in terms of programs, because that's how we're appropriated funds. But if you're a local government, you're looking at the process of signing people up for summer camp, emergency response. You think of from need to delivery, and what is that chain of events? That's not the framework that the feds tend to look at, and we suffer for it, right? Because if you're the citizen applying for a grant or looking for a new social security card or trying to find out how you export, that's a process. And to make sure that consistently happens at a high level, you have to have some measurements in place. You have to watch your data over the course of the process. And you need to have somebody in charge of monitoring that data. So if something goes off the tracks, somebody acts immediately. And that's really the secret sauce, having somebody who's watching the data about the process and intervening when it goes off the tracks immediately. So you're not finding out through the Washington Post 3 months later that maybe something isn't working so well, right?
Right,
so
like someone was like falling asleep at the switch or something.
Yeah, you got it done. So process management, if it were adopted wholesale by the federal government, would have an enormous positive effect. Because when people don't trust us, it's often not to do with policy. It has to do with, dang it, I can't get through to these people. I don't know what button to push, or they're too slow, or they're inconsistent, or I don't even know what they need to get what I need. So process management, were it adopted wholesale in the federal government, would be a great asset and a great contribution, because we really need to up the trust in government. So it's not an insignificant topic. The agility part that panel is also near to my heart. And as much as someone who's worked for many decades, I've had to be very agile. As you can imagine, what's happened, Nixon through Biden, that's a lot of change and a lot of agility. But what I feel is most important for anybody adapting to new priorities isn't so much what they know, is their passion for knowing. Right? I think you don't hire because somebody is a total expert in a narrow band, because that narrow band is going to be a different band in a year. You hire them because they love to learn, and they're passionate about the subject, so they'll find out what they need to know to be successful. That's the person I want to work with. Somebody who's going to find out anything and everything they need to know to make that happen. And that's the agile person.
Yeah, it's not like they're the subject matter expert in one thing and, that's where their narrow lane is. It's really having this adaptability to do so much because the requirements that are placed on government is just tremendous.
And ever changing. Now, the one caveat on all that is we have 4 interns sitting outside my door right now. Is for the young people coming into the system, I tell them whatever you're majoring in, you're going to minor in information management, because data and information management, knowledge management is like my yellow pad when I graduated from college. It'd be almost like you couldn't write and read if you can't do the basics. So they all need to come in, even beyond basic data literacy, because young people all can use their phones well, and they're quick with the apps. But there's a difference between that and knowing how to use the analytical software. So I want a passionate learner, but they need to come in equipped to sit in front of these computers and make them dance.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, having that level of engagement that it sounds like you're really providing was one of the key items that I think that you were talking about in some of the panels and the discussions. And it really feels like, honestly, those concepts are about how to have fulfilling careers in public service, not just like you individually managing your teams and I check the box and I get the job done, but hearing the way you describe everything, there's a clear passion that you have for it.
Yeah. And I'm refreshed that it's not just a generational thing. We recently hired a young man in the performance shop, and what I heard from him was an echo. He wants to make government work better. You really need to bring a patriotic vigor to the federal bureaucracy to be the people I want to work with. And it's so refreshing to know that there's generations of folks coming up with that same feeling.
Yeah, so many of them. And in fact, that's the whole focus of what this show is all about. It's how do we help motivate and inspire so many people in public service who are continuing to work hard because they believe that it is good work worth doing.
Yes.
They can make a difference in the world.
Yeah. And our environment here, in the federal government, you must be collaborative because there's so many disciplines that come to any important decision and should come to any important decision. So you have to learn to be collaborative, but you also have to have the passion that if months goes by and you haven't moved ahead, you're going to find the button you have to push, the avenue you have to pursue, the person you need to talk to actually then move it forward, results. And if you're not a little bit disturbed if a long time goes by and somehow it's not happening, I want to work with you either. You want to actually make a difference, and it's challenging, but that's why that passion is so particularly important in the federal setting.
Passion, absolutely. I mean, it's one step below a little of an obsession. I think that was in that movie National Treasure. What do you get? One level below that, and it's the passion. So when you wake up on Monday morning, you're excited about things rather than feeling like, oh, I got to go do this again, or I feel like I'm running through all this bureaucracy. But how do we really make change, especially in a system that is designed to not have as quick of a change as possible? To help preserve what it was intended for.
I've often thought I always had the passion, even if it's some days a little bit more subdued than others, but also a little bit intimidated. I wake up a little fearful. And the reason for that is it is a very complex system to navigate. and with a lot of folks invested, ego invested, and it's not difficult to step wrong. So a little, always passionate, always a little bit intimidated, but letting the vision really drive the behavior.
Letting the vision drive the behavior. Yeah, that pulls an individual forward. I heard this quotation once that said, when the pull of your desires overcomes the gravity of your reality, you'll begin to fly. So if your vision is moving things forward, you change things.
Yeah, the reality is true, and it's very easy to be cynical. And it's probably easier to be cynical in 2022 than years ago. You know, if you watch the news regularly, say the litany is the weather, extreme weather, war in Ukraine, what's happening with COVID today, and what's happened with mass shootings. That's the litany of the evening news. And with that in your face day after day, to say, I believe I can make a contribution and pull us out of a tailspin, it takes some courage. It actually takes some courage.
Absolutely. I mean, it's standing in the face of all that adversity essentially and people's perceptions. I saw a news report not too long ago that said that the confidence that the public has in government is at one of its lowest points that it's had.
Yeah.
And yet we still show up to work every day doing the work of the people without having much fanfare or acknowledgement. You know, every time a plane lands or takes off perfectly, it doesn't make the news. But if something goes wrong, then it's all over the place.
Right, right. And if you look over the past few years, even though we have a lot to worry about, we also have a lot of examples of people who rose, right? Who didn't go along, who made. Oh, I guess a really good example is just the speed of the vaccine, right? Who the heck gets vaccines ready in 2 years? Who the heck does that? I mean, you read the story of it. It started with initiative back a few decades and insights. I love the story of Dr. Fauci was apparently talking to Bill Clinton about vaccines, particularly related to HIV. And Bill said, what do we need? What would make this happen? He said, well, we need a cross-disciplinary group. There's several swim lanes that have to converge to make this happen. They created it and were able to develop the basic technology that was eventually used to deal with the COVID virus. But it's somebody saying to the United States president, okay, you asked, let me tell you what we need. I will tell you. And then somebody saying, okay, then let's do this thing. Now, a little more of that in our bureaucratic lives would be great.
It's so neat just to add all of those things. I mean, to have a concept about something, and then if there's enough political will behind it, there's always so many individuals willing to win the day for the benefit of the public. And you're right, a vaccine in 2 years, when typically these things take, you know, upwards of decades.
So many contributors at different avenues of aspects of the technology that had to be evolved to make that happen. It's nothing short of miraculous, but it's a statement about the goodness of people. And sometimes we see more obvious the statements about our worst side, but our best is pretty remarkable. And you see in the federal bureaucracy some really inspiring people. I'm happy to report.
It is encouraging, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, when you spend day in, day out going to the different meetings, having the opportunities to really work in government, you see a side of people that you typically don't expect to see in government. I mean, there's this concept of a person that's at the DMV, you know, and people apply that everywhere, you know, hardworking people at DMV as well. But, you know, that's just this idea or concept. But you know, when you consider like how the government has to be innovative and creative and really attract top talent away from huge industries, big salaries, and yet they do it because they have a willingness to contribute towards something that is bigger than all of us.
Yeah, well, even the DMV stereotype is a really good example of where process change needs to happen. Folks in those kind of jobs get burnout, indifferent, callous because the processes they're using does not enable them to really serve people well. And they feel like a small cog in the wheel, not able to affect the wheel. And for lack of empowerment to really provide good service, they get numb to the needs of the people in front of them. And I've worked with process improvement teams where you get those kind of folks together and say, okay, tell me what's broken. What drives you crazy about the system you use? And they're born again. They're absolutely born again because it's bothered them. They've known what's wrong with it. And to actually get a system that makes them serve people well, reignites them. So there is hope. And that's why I spread the gospel of process improvement, because that numbness you see in bureaucrats typically comes from working with the system through which you cannot succeed. You know damn well at your best efforts will not make that customer really feel good about what's happening. And I'd like to spread the word that it doesn't have to be that way.
Doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. It's so great, not just talking to you, Christine, about like the passion for public service, but how we can help public service work better. Even within the constraints and everything that we have. It sounds like you've developed like this secret formula that should be, like you said, spread around the gospel for everyone to catch this.
It's not an entire secret, but it's certainly well-held information. When I worked for the city of Coral Springs in Florida, we started using something called the Baldrige Framework. Okay? And a part of the department, ironically, part of the Department of Commerce is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they put out standards for many things, like there's a formula for steel. And if it doesn't meet those specs, it's not steel, it's something else. Believe it or not, there's also one for peanut butter. If it doesn't meet that chemical combination, it's peanut spread, but you can't call it peanut butter, right? Well, they also have a standard for what it looks like to run something well. And it's called the Baldrige Framework. And it's been tested, and we adopted that framework in city government. And it was a revelation. Now, it took us the better part of 15 years to pull the whole model up, but it was 15 years of progress, as opposed to running at something and not completing that aspect and then trying something else. And with the federal government, with the change in the leadership so much every couple of years, no less every 4 years, there's a tendency to start a lot and not finish enough, right?
Yep.
But here at the local government, we were able to set a path, a decade's worth of path, and actually complete each phase as we move forward, produced a revelation. Our citizen satisfaction rate is typically 95%.
Wow.
Our employee satisfaction rate was comparable. Those numbers are unheard of by Nordstrom's, right? So it can be done. And one of the reasons I was talking so much about process management and the customer is one of the things that drives that to the 95 level is a heavy focus on the resident, on the customer. And the federal government focuses, for the most part, very much on congressional intent, which is, of course, important. They're the bosses, so to speak, in addition to the administration. But we need to, through process management, keep our eye much more on the citizens we serve, on the folks that come to us, the residents that we're supposed to help. And with that as our focus, we'll build trust.
That's amazing. I mean, that is a classic example of really good vision setting. I mean, what is the focus of and the purpose of an organization to serve the public? And when you have that at the center of what your vision is, yeah, gosh, no wonder that the customer approval ratings and the citizens approval ratings were so high.
We had multiple mechanisms for hearing from the citizens. So we did an annual survey. We tracked all complaints. Our website had features where you could tell us what's going on. So it was multimedia in terms of making sure we're listening to the customer and getting a lot of feedback from the customer. I'll add this, I'll lobby for a particular practice, right? So if I were in charge of orientation for all the new political appointees when they come in, I say, sit down and try and use the service you're going to be managing. So if you're going to run a grants program, go sit with somebody and shoulder to shoulder where they apply for that grant. much all the mechanics. If you're supposed to provide social security cards, try and get one,
Right.
but use the system. I have a recollection when I came back to the federal government about 2010, and my boss, I was complaining about how hard it was to get my transit benefit. It was very complicated at that point. And he said, I don't understand. I just handed it to Sam over there, and Sam handed me my card. And I said, yeah, well, Sam just ran the gauntlet that I ran. So they need to actually kind of get their hands dirty and see what it looks like from the standpoint of the customer. So if you're applying for a patent and you're the director of patents, go sit with somebody who's applying and see the exact mechanics that person has to go through. And then you'll know what you need to improve. But as long as you're at arm's length, it's going to be invisible to you.
It's funny, that reminds me so often, I hear stories of political appointees who come through White House appointments, and that is one separate process. And then everyone else that has to come through the general USA jobs application process, all of that. And so when they get in there, they're thinking, yeah, this process was easy. What do you mean? And everyone who had to go through this huge sludge just to get there.
Yeah, walking apart. Right.
I have something here I think you'll like. So as part of our travelings with the Gov Geeks, one of the things that we like to do is go to any place that has anything to do with government. And one of our favorite places had this really gorgeous piece of the original red tape. And this is from the National Archives. So it's this idea about the importance of internal controls and making sure that processes are done, but they're done in a way that perhaps would allow us to be able to facilitate the good that government is trying to do.
Yeah. Well, there's an irony, because when we mess up and it becomes high visibility, Congress gets upset, and then they pass a law that adds the red tape.
Yep.
So then it's even harder to do it efficiently. So it is not a virtuous cycle. But periodically, if we review our systems for doing things and we go to Congress and say, hey, this makes sense, this does not, I'm sure they're with us. Something we did way back when, I'm talking maybe late 70s, and I haven't seen the drill since, was we were asked once a year, every year, tell me something in your omnibus law that doesn't add value, that you can't see what comes of it, but it adds work. And then we put together this list of broom work that was needed from Congress and clean this up. And it would largely happen if it had no value, nobody had an interest in it. And it's very hard from Capitol Hill always to see what has value and what doesn't. So it made a lot of sense. If it's being done now, it's not on my radar.
This is amazing. You know, just these couple of minutes having this conversation with you. I don't know if everyone that is watching this is listening to this, if you feel the same thing, but honestly, I feel very encouraged. I feel excited. I feel motivated about all the wonderful things that government does and can do.
Yeah. And I couldn't, from a very tender age, even dream of doing anything else. I never could get into making, a car or, making government, serving the people. To me, that's the motivator. And there's a lot more out there like that. And I would say our public administration schools, our public policy schools are turning out wonderful people. And coming out with the fresh skills we need and good insight, more internships. The interns we have these days are really ready to hit the deck running because they've had job experience. They have been in the workplace. So I'm not at all nervous about the group we're handing things over to. I think they're going to get us to another level.
Oh, I love it. Yes, we'll continue to advance and grow as the needs of the people continue to advance and grow. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And Christine, I'm curious, do you have any materials that you would like us to share with our Gov Geekdom, our larger community at large?
I don't know the best way to get it. This publication used to come out through the International City Managers, ICMA, International City Managers Association, but it's a book called We Don't Make Widgets. It's very brief. It's kind of humorous. And it's by Ken Miller. And I would expect if you Google it or go on Amazon, you'll find it. We Don't Make Widgets by Ken Miller. And it's ironic because he's saying you do make widgets. If you don't know what your product is, if you don't know what your product is, you cannot manage. So, you know, your product might be a legal opinion, your product might be a grant approved, but know what your product is. And then just like a business, know the inputs and the process to produce it, and then you can manage it. But if you're very ambiguous about what the heck you're trying to do here, your ability to manage is very limited.
Absolutely. I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you have good work to do for the government in just a couple of minutes. We'll make sure to include all of the materials in the show notes as well. Christine, please, thank you so much. Please accept our appreciation and our thanks. Sincerely, thank you for your service. You are a wonderful representation of what government has to offer.
Thank you, and thanks for your time and for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate your time and attention. If you're as passionate about government as Christine is, that is fantastic. The GovGeeks is here to support you. We look forward to further conversations. And again, thank you all for your service.